A while back, I looked at the original Pokemon games, Red and Blue, as well as their two remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green, and Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, to see how the very first Pokemon games were adapted. I had a lot of fun making that video, and due to the fact that I'm still hyperfixating on Pokemon, today we're looking at the Generation 2 games, Gold and Silver, and their remakes, HeartGold and SoulSilver, to see how those games were adapted. Pokemon Gold and Silver, released in the United States on October 15, 2000, serve as direct sequels to Red and Blue. Following those games, Gold and Silver were intended to be the ultimate in Pokemon games, and that Tsunekazu Ishihara, current president and CEO of the Pokemon Company, but then just a producer at Creatures Inc., didn't intend to make any more Pokemon titles. If these were the last Pokemon games made, the series would have gone out with a bang, being the third best-selling game on the Game Boy and reviewed quite favorably. Of course, they weren't, and less than a year later, Pokemon Crystal was pumped out in order to fill the catalog on a Japanese cell phone adapter, the mobile system GB. Anyway, for this video I played through Crystal, due to many aspects of HeartGold and SoulSilver being drawn from the elements that Crystal added to Gold and Silver. However, to simplify things, I'll be referring to the Generation 2 games as Gold and Silver, as that sounds much nicer than both the Generation 2 games and Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Gold and Silver take place in the region of Johto, which lies just west of Kanto, 3 years after the events of Red and Blue. As far as sequels go, Gold and Silver do a tremendous job of not alienating those that didn't play the first games. Team Rocket are once again the antagonists, hoping to bring Giovanni out of hiding after 3 long years and rebuild the organization. But even if players don't remember them from Red and Blue, their actions at the Slowpoke Well in the Lake of Rage show them to be heartless criminals, deserving of their stupid Ekans and Rattatas to be beaten to a pulp. You don't need to remember their takeover of Silph to want to defeat them. Many characters from Red and Blue, such as Professor Oak, Bill, and Lance, play a role in Gold and Silver too, but these games establish them well, so their inclusion is less, should I know these guys? And more, oh man, is that Bill? Love his work. The main success of these games as sequels stems from how well they add onto the world building that Red and Blue started. One of the more notable ways this is done is the mythology Gold and Silver introduce. The largest example of this is the story of the Brass Tower being burned down 150 years prior to the games, where 3 unnamed Pokemon perished, only to be revived by Ho-Oh as Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. In Red and Blue, the most mythology explored is the existence of the legendary birds. Other instances of added mythology are Celebi, who serves as the guardian of Ilex Forest and can travel through time. Then you have the ruins of Alph and the mysterious, yet useless, Unknown. There's also Kurt, who can make Pokeballs from apricorns. But really, the most important thing is that these games make the legendary Pokemon feel like these incredibly powerful, ancient creatures spoken only about in myth, that are inevitably left to rot in Bill's PC. Gold and Silver also succeed at making the world feel more lively. There are so many little encounters, like feeding Moo Moo the Miltank berries, that make the world even more engaging. For the most part, everything you did in Red and Blue was required for the story. Sure, you could barge into many people's homes and be handsomely rewarded for doing so, but the games were relatively devoid of cute little events. In Gold and Silver, however, there are tons of these events. You can find and defeat the Karate King in Mount Mortar to obtain a Tyrogue. You can obtain Kenya the Spearow from Webster and deliver the mail it's holding to Webster's friend. You can show Bill's grandfather different Pokemon in order to obtain evolutionary stones. You can catch a Lapras in Union Cave every Friday. You can watch Clefairy's throw it back at Mount Moon every Monday night. Even the events required for story progression are a little more involved and interesting than they were in Red and Blue. You have to help this guy catch his boss's Farfetch to get the HM for cut. You have to water a weird tree that turns out to be Sudowoodo. You have to get medicine for a sick Ampharos that serves as the light in a lighthouse. You have to stop Team Rocket from cutting off and selling Slowpoke tails and from forcing Magikarp to evolve. All these events are simply more engaging than Wake Up Sweepy Pokemon and Stop Evil Game from stealing and killing Pokemon. Gold and Silver, well actually Crystal, also had the first in-game event. By obtaining the GS Ball, which was a Japanese only event, you get to catch a Celebi in the Ilex Forest. While the event isn't much, it's still pretty nifty and much more interesting than just being handed a Celebi. The largest world building that Gold and Silver do, however, is in the way they greatly expand the idea of Pokemon. Red and Blue did a tremendous job creating this idea of Pokemon, don't get me wrong, but the expansions Gold and Silver make are incredible. These games add an in-game clock, going as far as to incorporate daylight savings time. This allows different Pokemon to spawn depending on what time it is, which is a really cool addition. The clock also keeps track of what day of the week it is, and some events, such as the bug catching contest, only happen on certain days of the week. Dark and Steel type Pokemon were introduced to balance Psychic types, as Dark types are immune to Psychic attacks, and Steel types resist them. Magnemite and Magneton were given Steel as a secondary type as well, because, well, look at them. Pokemon can now hold items, which combined with the special stat being split into both the special attack and special defense, and an overall lack of glitches, make combat much more enjoyable than in Red and Blue. Trainer AI and trainer teams are more competent, and the Elite Four whooped my ass quite a few times before I beat them. Certain Pokemon, such as Onix, Scyther, and Seadra, now evolve after being traded while holding an item. Chansey and Golbat were given an evolution, and Slowbro, Poliwhirl, and Gloom were given alternate evolutions. Many Pokemon now only evolve when their friendship, which is a new stat introduced in Gold and Silver, is high. And some Pokemon, like Espeon and Umbreon, only evolve either in the day or at night. I just find it really cool that a lot of the Johto Pokemon are simply new evolutions of pre-existing Pokemon. The legendary beasts, Entei, Raikou, and, only in Gold and Silver, Suicune roam Johto. These beasts can be encountered randomly all throughout the region but flee immediately, requiring a good deal of luck and strategy, or a Master Ball, to catch them. This roaming mechanic is an effective way of conveying the power these creatures wield, as they can cross the entire region in the blink of an eye, and it makes the player take on this role of a tracker, hunting high and low for these beasts. However, in practice, I find it incredibly obnoxious and frustrating. On paper, this concept is really neat, as these legendary creatures obviously are not confined to a singular route, but it can be really frustrating to catch these guys. The excruciating part is that you don't even know where they are until you stumble across them for the first time. After that, I guess your trainer sticks a tracker on them or something, because from then on you can check the Pokedex to see where they are. I ended up just using this graphic from Reddit to cheese the game and save myself the hours of agony. But hey, if I was 7 and had all the free time in the world, I would have loved this mechanic. Breeding was also introduced in these games, and it works like it does in real life. Baby Pokemon of Kanto Pokemon can be acquired by breeding their evolutions. Most Pokemon now have genders as a result of this mechanic. Although the way eggs are explained makes it seem that like no one studies Pokemon at all. Like, you're telling me you don't know how my Pokemon got that egg? No one knows how my Pokemon got that egg at all? Shiny Pokemon were introduced, which are just rare palette swaps of the base design. But when combined with the new evolutions of older Pokemon, they help reinforce the idea that Pokemon are actual creatures that exist and aren't entirely uniform. The Battle Tower, added in Crystal, lets you test your battling skills by having you fight 7 trainers in a row. It's kind of fun, but because the game doesn't alter the levels of your Pokemon at all, you need to grind your team up to whatever level in order to make the fights fair. For instance, if you choose the level 50 division, you can use Pokemon from level 1 to 50, but not 51. The game won't de-level your Pokemon for you. And if you challenge the level 60 division with a level 51 Pokemon, the game won't level your Pokemon up to 60 despite all your opponents being that level. That fact alone kind of sours the whole Battle Tower for me. Regardless, the concept of trainers from around the world gathering in one spot to battle effectively in a vacuum is a really interesting look into the world of in-universe competitive Pokemon. There's also the Trainer House, where once a day you can battle a Pokemon trainer. By default, the trainer is Cal, but by using the Mystery Gift, a nifty feature that uses the infrared port on the Game Boy Color, with another player, you get a random item and Cal gets replaced with that player's Pokemon team. Neat. Anyway, all these additions help to expand the idea of Pokemon and make the in-game world feel more authentic. There is so much content in this game, and that's not even mentioning the fact that you can trade your Pokemon from Gold and Silver to Red and Blue. Well, as long as the Pokemon is one of the original 151 and isn't holding a held item, and also doesn't learn any moves that were introduced in Gold and Silver. Other than that, you can trade them back and forth as much as you want. Despite all the technical shortcomings that these games have, they can still be identified as Pokemon games. All the components of what we think of as a Pokemon game are here. But unfortunately, for as much as I just champion the world building that Gold and Silver accomplished, no game bats 1,000, and there are a lot of weird little things this game does. You don't see that many Johto Pokemon in Johto, but like actually. Half the gym leaders exclusively use Kanto Pokemon for some reason. Faulkner has a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto. Why not a Hoot Hoot or a Natsu? Bugsy has a Kakuna, Metapod, and Scyther. Bro, use a Spinarak or a Ladybug or something. Whitney could have used an Apom over her Clefairy, and Morty could have used a Mischievous instead of 2 Haunters. Why didn't Chuck use a Heracross or Hitmontop instead of Poliwrath and Primeape? Jasmine used 2 Magnemites over like Scissor or Fortress. Price used both Seal and Dugong instead of a Delibird or a Sneasel or something. Claire gets a pass though, because she used the only Dragon type added in Generation 2. Now, not only do you not see a lot of Johto Pokemon, but you outright can't catch quite a few until you get to Kanto. Why? Why have the reward of going to Kanto be catching Johto Pokemon? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Slugma, Houndour, Mischievous, Murkrow, and Larvitar can't be caught until you have access to Kanto. It's so dumb. You're telling me you can catch Growlithe and Johto but not Houndour? Literally cruel. Alright, do Gold and Silver have one more region to explore than Red and Blue? I don't know if I'd go that far. There's about a region and a half here. After beating Lance, you get the SS ticket, which allows you to go to Kanto. Is it really cool that Kanto is here in any capacity? Yeah, of course. But there are just so many aspects of Kanto's inclusion that are just disappointing to say the least. The Safari Zone is closed because the Warden is on vacation. The Pewter Museum of Science is closed for renovations. Mount Moon is effectively 2 rooms, but you can see Clefairy's dance. The underground path between routes 7 and 8 is closed due to too many trainer fights taking place there. The Sea Foam Islands disappeared. Cinnabar Island was destroyed by a volcano. Kinda base, not gonna lie. Viridian Forest was replaced with a hedge maze. There's no Cerulean Cave. However, you can obtain the Bizarre Berserk gene just outside, which is a consumable hold item that is immediately used as soon as a Pokemon enters the field. It raises a Pokemon's attack by 2 stages and confuses them for 256 turns. Gold and Silver are the only games it's ever appeared in, and it doesn't have any artwork associated with it. The only story event in Kanto is that you need to recover a stolen machine part for the now functioning power plant from a foreign rocket grunt in order to wake up another sleeping Snorlax with your radio this time. You get to fight all 8 Kanto gym leaders, but after becoming the league champion, none of them are really that challenging, and you can knock them out in a couple of hours. Really, the disappointment from how little there is to do in Kanto kinda offsets the wow factor of getting to go there in the first place. However, all things considered, Gold and Silver are phenomenal games. They serve as near perfect sequels to Red and Blue and explore and expand the world of Pokemon in extremely interesting ways. But the most interesting thing they do is seemingly understand that they couldn't just do what Red and Blue did again. Despite immediately following them, Gold and Silver do not emphasize catching and trading Pokemon nearly as much as Red and Blue did. In fact, the only reason to trade in Gold and Silver is to get the other 2 starter Pokemon and the trade exclusive and version exclusive Pokemon. There are no non-exclusive decisions in these games, unlike in Red and Blue, which had players pick between the Dome and Helix fossils, Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, and what to evolve their Eevee into. Instead, Gold and Silver focus on curating and expanding the world of Pokemon and not on catching them all, even if the box art still says otherwise. Every town has its own little story that unfolds, and there are far more cutscenes than in Red and Blue. In fact, there's almost this conflicting attempt to create a more story-driven game while still giving players the freedom to explore Johto on their own. Like, up until Ecruteak City, the game is strictly linear. You have to go to Violet City, Azalea Town, and Goldenrod City in that order. But once you get to Ecruteak, you can go either east or west, and the only roadblock you have is the guy blocking you in Mahogany Town. Yet, even during this segment, there's still a lot of story events that have to be completed, such as the Team Rocket HQ and Team Rocket takeover of the Goldenrod radio tower. It's just so strange that the game randomly opens up at this point. Like, there's nothing particularly special about Ecruteak that would imply that this is where the game stops railroading you, especially because once you get past Mahogany Town, the game becomes linear once again until you beat the Elite Four, and then you get to Kanto, which is almost completely open-ended. That at least makes sense, as after becoming the league champion, the player should be able to explore Kanto on their own. In spite of the odd open-endedness in Johto, Gold and Silver did a great job in setting up future Pokemon games to fully realize any type of story they tackled, except for the fact that they kept gyms. I sincerely think that these games also having 8 gyms and also having an Elite Four set up the monotony that the next few generations of Pokemon would have. Beat 8 gyms while taking down some evil criminal organization. Why couldn't there have been some other grand quest for the player to fulfill? Why do Kanto and Johto both have 8 gyms? If you get 4 Johto badges and 4 Kanto badges, can you still take on the Elite Four at the Indigo Plateau? Like, I understand why Gold and Silver did this, I just wish they hadn't. There must have been something else for the plot to be about. The player could have been like helping Professor Oak or Professor Elm with their research, and then they have fun adventures and wind up uncovering some huge conspiracy or something. Then, when you go to Kanto, fighting the gyms there is fun because you haven't already beaten 8 gyms. I don't know, man, there's just more that Pokemon could be. And I know that isn't a fair criticism of these games, and it certainly doesn't stop me from enjoying them. It's just a sentiment I feel after having the luxury of 20 years worth of retrospection. Regardless, Gold and Silver did a stand-up job at transforming Pokemon from just some novel RPG where you trade fun creatures into a fully fleshed out game with intricate lore and mechanics that function as intended, for the most part. By focusing on its narrative more, it set up future installments for the more grandiose plots. Now we get into Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver, which, before we go any further, I must admit are my favorite Pokemon games to date and some of my favorite video games in general. HeartGold and SoulSilver were released on March 14th, 2010 to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of Gold and Silver, and that is the perfect way to describe how Game Freak went about remaking those games. In a Nawada Asks interview, Shigeki Morimoto, the game's director, discussed his thought process on how to remake such beloved games. The first thing that I knew I needed to bear in mind was to respect the feelings of those people who'd played Gold and Silver 10 years before. I think that players have very strong memories of the game, so they'd think things like, this trainer is still strong, and if I do this here, this is going to happen. I knew I needed to respect these feelings, but at the same time, there are a large number of players who had no knowledge of Gold and Silver and who first played Pokemon on the Game Boy Advance or the Nintendo DS. While we were creating the game, we were conscious of making it so that these players could play with the sense that it was a totally new game. This sentiment is reiterated by the president of Game Freak in Celadon City, who says, "What do you think? I am the president here. We are remaking an old game, but this is quite a challenge. Old fans would not want us to mess with their good memories, but there is no point in just redoing the same thing, right? We are working towards something that brings back memories yet is also completely new. I've been in this business for 20 years now, but creating a game is always a rewarding challenge." HeartGold and SoulSilver needed to toe the line of both playing to old fans' expectations while keeping them surprised and catering to new players who didn't know what a Johto was. And the way Game Freak succeeded in doing so was by keeping the base game mostly intact but adding a gargantuan amount of new content. Here's what Morimoto and Ishihari said in reference to the added features in Gold and Silver. "We've been greedy in the amount of gameplay elements we've squeezed in there. There's so much included that I even had colleagues saying to me, 'Are you sure that we should be going this far with a remake?' In that sense, it's not simply a remake. I think it's more than that. For that reason, I would like to see these games enjoyed by as large a number of people as possible. There are so many gameplay elements included that you almost want to say, is this really just a bonus add-on? Let's start by addressing the differences between Gold and Silver and HeartGold and SoulSilver. The biggest little difference is that all 493 Pokemon can walk behind you, from a lowly Slugma to the mighty Arceus. Does each Pokemon only have 6 sprites? Yeah. Is it still cool as hell? Yeah. It's a fun addition, being able to walk alongside your favorite Pokemon. And seeing the large Pokemon go inside their Pokeballs when you enter a building is cute. Like, obviously Nurse Joy doesn't want Groudon walking around inside a Pokemon Center. And if the Pokemon you're walking with is the one using an HM, you get to see them use it on the field. And you get to chat with your Pokemon, and sometimes they find items, and it's really cute. There are also different sprites depending on whether or not the Pokemon is shiny. The Apricorn box was introduced in order to keep Apricorn stored in one place. Not only that, but Apricorn trees now only yield Apricorns, instead of both Apricorns and berries. Apricorns can also be blended in the Apri Blender to make performance-enhancing smoothies for your Pokemon. The way berries are obtained is by growing them in berry pots and having your mother purchase them for you. The running shoes are given to you by this kind old man and can be toggled on or off by pushing the shoe button, so you don't need to hold B all the time. The player character no longer feels obligated to answer every call they get on their Pokegear, which is great, because they're learning how to say no and how to set personal boundaries. Like, Anthony, don't call me asking if I'm up. That's weird, I'm 10. In the Ilex Forest, you have to catch 2 Farfetch'd instead of 1. Before you fight Whitney and Goldenrod, you have to obtain the radio card for the Pokegear at the radio tower. And Whitney is also there, forgetting the difference between apricots and apricorns. Classic Whitney. You no longer get to play the slots in the Goldenrod and Celadon game corners, except in the Japanese versions. Instead, you play Voltorb Flip, which is a mix of Picross and Minesweeper. It's pretty fun, although I would have loved to play the slots. But yeah, kids shouldn't be gambling rambling, whatever. When you first arrive at the Ekritique Dance Theater, you fight a rocket grunt instead of the kimono girls. Then, upon leaving, this old man automatically gives you the egg-gem for Surf instead of you needing to ask him for it. As you venture east on Route 42 for the first time, this hiker nearly tramples you and gives you the egg-gem for Strength to make amends, instead of you needing to talk to this random sailor in Olivine City to get it. After healing Moo Moo at Moo Moo Farm, you're given the Seal Case, which can be used to attach seals to ball capsules. This results in a fun animation playing whenever you send a Pokemon out. You also get TM83 for healing Moo Moo, not TM13. Riveting comparison, I know. The story arc of Eusine trying to catch Suicune from Crystal is in these games, although instead of getting to catch Suicune in the Tin Tower, you have to track it all the way to Route 25. As soon as Entei and Raikou start roaming Johto, you can track where they are by checking your Pokegear map. While it does ruin the adventure of locating these beasts all on your own, it makes catching them so much easier. These two trainers thank you for healing Amphi at the Olivine City Gym, which is just kinda cute. The Rocket executives were given names: Proton, Petrol, Ariana, and Archer. The battle with Ariana at Team Rocket HQ was turned into a double battle with you fighting alongside Lance. Double battles simply didn't exist in Gold and Silver, so I can't really fault those games, but being able to fight alongside Lance is pretty cool. In order to access Goldenrod Radio Tower when Team Rocket takes it over, you have to dress up as a Rocket Grunt. In the Ice Path, this NPC will prevent you from moving forward until you obtain the egg-gem for Waterfall. In Gold and Silver, you can totally bypass it. Using Whirlpool no longer gets rid of the Whirlpool. Instead, you just glide across it. Throughout Johto, you'll encounter the 5 Kimono Girls. One in Violet City after obtaining the egg from Professor Elm's aid, one lost in Ilex Forest, one in the Ekritique Dance Theater, one in the Goldenrod Tunnel, and one in the Ice Path. In order to access the Elite Four once you defeat Claire, you have to first defeat the 5 Kimono Girls at the Ekritique Dance Theater, then encounter Ho-Oh or Lugia at the Bell Tower or Whirlpool Islands respectively. Finally, you can now fly to the Pokemon League Reception Gate and the Indigo Plateau. From these two locations, you can fly to any location in both Johto and Kanto. Back in Gold and Silver, you either had to take the Magnet Train or the SS Aqua every time you wanted to go between Kanto and Johto. Although considering you can fly between the two regions at will, it begs the question why you have to make a pit stop at the Indigo Plateau every time. Maybe your Pokegear or whomever gets tired and needs to take a break, who knows. Now let's get into everything that was added to HeartGold and SoulSilver. We'll start with what was my absolute favorite part of these games when I was a kid, the Pokeathlon. In these 5 triathlons, your Pokemon put their physical ability to the absolute limit in order to attain honor and glory of the highest magnitude: speed, power, skill, stamina, and jump. All 5 are needed to succeed in the most grueling games the world of Pokemon has to offer. The Hurdle Dash, the Ring Drop, the Snow Throw, the Lamp Jump, the Relay Race, the Block Smash, the Circle Push, the Disc Catch, the Pennant Capture, and the Goal Roll. There are 5 courses that each represent one of the 5 stats, and by doing well and winning these courses, you get athlete points that can be used to purchase things from the athlete shop. Every time a Pokemon wins a course, it gets a corresponding medal. What makes the Pokeathlon so engaging to me is that every single species of Pokemon has different stats, meaning that you end up using Pokemon you otherwise never would have. Typically, a Pokemon's worth is determined by its stats or move pool, but in the Pokeathlon, you get to make use of a Pokemon's innate physical ability. Who cares if Flareon's move pool doesn't complement its base stats? It's got high speed and power. Yeah, there are better flying types than Pidgeot, but look at its jump! Does Sunkern have the lowest base stat total of any Pokemon in the Generation 4 games? Maybe, but it has the potential to crush all 5 events. Pokemon is all about catching fun monsters, but unless you just like catching them all, there's no reason to use Pokemon that can't fight, because that's all you do. The Pokeathlon encourages you to seek out Pokemon that excel in certain fields, and, if nothing else, puts the random Pokemon that have been rotting in your PC to good use. That's the main reason I love the Pokeathlon so much. It gives all the unremarkable Pokemon a purpose. Yeah, the contests in Hoenn and Sinnoh also gave otherwise useless Pokemon purpose, but I just like the Pokeathlon more. It's more involved, you feel? It also just reminds me of the minigames from Super Mario 64 DS and New Super Mario Bros. That I sank dozens of hours into when I was a kid. And I know the footage being shown might make you think I'm a stupid oaf who doesn't have the guts for the Pokeathlon, but let me tell you, using the mouse from my Microsoft DS Lite as a stylus does not work all that well. Back in the day, I used to dominate the speed, jump, and power courses, believe me. Another big addition to HeartGold and SoulSilver is the Battle Frontier, which replaces the Battle Tower from Pokemon Crystal. You have 5 facilities to play in: the Battle Tower, Battle Factory, Battle Arcade, Battle Castle, and Battle Hall. The Battle Tower is exactly like the Battle Tower from Crystal. You have to fight 7 trainers in a row. The difference is now you get to choose between single and double battles. Single battles are 3-on-3 and double battles are 4-on-4. The Battle Factory has the player pick rental Pokemon to win 7 battles in a row. You start by picking a team of 3 Pokemon from a random pool of 6. After each battle, you get to trade one of your Pokemon for one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's a really cool gimmick, don't get me wrong, but it just never really clicked for me. I see the appeal, it's just not for me. The Battle Arcade sees the player trying to win 7 battles in a row, this time called games. Before each game, the player has to stop the game board in a very press your luck manner, which affects how the game will be played. These effects range from changing the weather to damaging or inflicting your or your opponent's Pokemon with status ailments. It's a decent gimmick, but because the game board cursor follows a pattern, I found it was too easy to always hit beneficial events. The Battle Castle has players, get this, battle 7 trainers in a row. The gimmick this time is Castle Points, a currency valid only in the Battle Castle that can be used to heal your Pokemon, buy items for them, learn information about upcoming opponents, and even increase or decrease the levels of opponents' Pokemon. Castle Points are earned by performing well in battles. I absolutely adore this facility, as having to decide how to spend the Castle Points and what Pokemon I should heal is 100% my type of neurosis. Finally, the Battle Hall has you fight one-on-one battles where you get to choose the opponent Pokemon's type. It's an exceedingly mindless mode that would be 10 times more enjoyable if you didn't spend half your time going in and out of fights. After your 20th consecutive win in every facility, except for the Battle Hall, which is 50, you are challenged by the Frontier Brain, who's essentially the boss of that facility. Beat them and you get these cool silver commemorative prints. After your 48th consecutive win in the facilities, 170 in the Battle Hall, you rematch the Frontier Brain and get these cool gold commemorative prints if you win. The Battle Frontier is a lot of fun and adds essentially a limitless amount of content, as you can just keep going through the facilities forever. And it has enough gimmicks that, in the event you get tired of basic Pokemon battles, you can switch it up and not get bored. The last big addition to HeartGold and SoulSilver is the Safari Zone, which was notably absent from Gold and Silver. It can be found west of Olivine City, past the newly introduced routes 47 and 48. There are 12 different areas in the Safari Zone: Peak, Desert, Plains, Meadow, Forest, Swamp, Marshland, Mountain, Rocky Beach, Wasteland, Savannah, and Wetland. Only 6 areas can be active at any given time. The owner of the Safari Zone, Balba, gives you 2 tests to complete. The first one is to catch a Geodude in the Safari Zone. After you do so, you're given access to the Area Customizer, which lets you change the layout of the Safari Zone. The second test is to catch a Sandshrew in the Safari Zone. After doing that, and obtaining the National Pokedex, Balba gives you access to blocks, which can be placed within areas of the Safari Zone to change what Pokemon appear there. Each area can house 30 blocks, which fall into 5 categories: Plains, Forest, Peak, Waterside, and Other. Many Pokemon require a certain amount of blocks to be encountered. To encounter a Hippopotas, for example, you need to place at least 28 Peak blocks in a desert area. Electabuzzes need 4 Peak blocks in a forest area to spawn. To catch the mighty Gibble, you have to place at least 52 Plains blocks and 68 Peak blocks in a Rocky Beach area. But wait, I hear you say, how can you place 120 blocks in an area? I thought the limit was 30. Here's where this needlessly complicated mechanic gets needlessly complicateder. Every 10th day, a type of block that's been placed in a currently active area will increase in value. Here's Bulbapedia's chart showing how these blocks increase. Now, the days are not related to the system's clock either. They are related to how many days you actually play the game. And because the blocks are only upgraded in the zones that are active, in order to even be able to catch every Pokemon in the Safari Zone, it'll take you 130 days minimum. Pretty absurd if you ask me. But you can catch around 150 types of Pokemon in the Safari Zone, which is really quite cool. And the whole block upgrading thing is almost like a weird little Animal Crossing, and how progress is tied directly to playing the game every day. In conclusion, the Johto Safari Zone is a bizarrely complex way to catch nearly 30% of the national dex that rewards you for playing daily. In Fuchsia City, replacing the Kanto Safari Zone is the PAL Park, which lets you migrate your Pokemon from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green to HeartGold and SoulSilver. Of course, it's not that easy though. You can only migrate 6 Pokemon a day, and you have to actually catch the Pokemon in a catching show. well. It's a truly obnoxious way of bringing your old Pokemon to these games that I didn't even like when I was a little kid. But at least you can bring them over in the first place. That's pretty cool. You get berries depending on how well you do in the catching show, but it would be so much more convenient if you didn't have to do catching shows in the first place. Now, really quickly, let's talk about all the other fun stuff added in HeartGold and SoulSilver. The Seaphone Islands return and you can catch Articuno there. Zapdos can be caught outside the power plant once the machine part has been returned, and Moltres can be caught inside Mount Silver. Cerulean Cave is here as well, and you can find Mewtwo within. However, the Berserk gene that could be found outside Cerulean Cave is no longer there. The Viridian Forest is a forest once more, no longer a poultry hedge maze. The Pewter Museum of Science is open again, and you can have your fossils turned into Pokemon here. These meteorites on Route 3 can change your Deoxys between normal, attack, speed, and defense form. And yes, these 3 Deoxyses were 100% legitimately obtained. I'm offended you would even ask. If you bring a Rotom in the Silphco building, you can go to the basement and access 5 appliances that change Rotom between Heat, Wash, Frost, Fan, and Mow Rotom. And like with my Deoxyses, this level 1 Rotom was also legitimately obtained. You can play dress up with your Pokemon in the Goldenrod Tunnel, putting silly accessories on them and taking photos with them. This man, Cameron, can also be found all across the world and will take a photo of you and your Pokemon that can be accessed from your PC. If you enter the Goldenrod Flower Shop with a Fateful Encounter Shaman, whatever that means, this nice girl will give you a Gracidia, which can be used to exchange Shaman between land and sky form. In Violet City, you can talk to Primo, the guy from the Pokedude show, and tell him nonsense to obtain a Slugma, Wooper, and Mareep, as well as a bunch of cool PC wallpapers. After earning all 8 Kanto badges, Professor Oak gives you the HM for Rock Climb, which lets you navigate all these rock walls you've seen throughout Johto and Kanto. It's really kind of a lame reward, as there's a very low chance you'll remember all the rock climb spots you've encountered on your journey, or I didn't at least. I might be projecting. Also, I think Rock Climb is one of the most annoying HMs because you have to use it so many times in quick succession and the animations are so slow. Also, after earning all 8 Kanto badges, if you go to Game Freak's headquarters in Celadon City, you can get the GB Sounds. This fun device lets you listen to chiptune style versions of most songs in the game. Once you obtain Copycat Stall at the Vermilion City Pokemon Fan Club, Hoenn League champion Steven Stone tells you that either Latios or Latios, depending on which version you're playing, has started roaming Kanto. Really cool that you get to catch a Hoenn legendary Pokemon, but really annoying that it roams. Speaking of catching a Hoenn legendary Pokemon, after defeating Red on Mount Silver, you can speak with Mr. Pokemon to obtain either the Red or Blue Orb, again depending on which version you're playing. By taking this orb to the Embedded Tower on Route 47, you then get to catch either Kyogre or Groudon. Then, if you show Professor Oak a Kyogre and Groudon that were both caught at the Embedded Tower, he'll give you the Jade Orb, which lets you catch Rayquaza at the Embedded Tower. Also, after defeating Red, if you speak with Steven Stone at Silphco, he gives you one of the Hoenn starters, depending on how you answer his question. And if you speak with Professor Oak after defeating Red, he gives you one of the Kanto starters. Once you obtain the National Dex, both the Hoenn and Sinnoh sound channels can be accessed on the radio. They play on Wednesday and Thursday respectively and cause certain Hoenn and Sinnoh Pokemon to spawn. Then we have the Global Trade System, or GTS, located in Goldenrod City. Back in the day, it was used to trade Pokemon all across the world, but it no longer has any use, as the Wi-Fi for these games has long since shut down. That makes walking through the all but derelict building a little eerie. All these people act as though Nintendo Wi-Fi is still up and running and hasn't been discontinued since May 20th, 2014. Finally, we get to the Pokewalker, which was one of the main selling points of HeartGold and SoulSilver, as it was bundled with every copy of the game. I never had one of these bad boys though, as I bought my childhood copy of SoulSilver secondhand. It's essentially just a pedometer that converts the number of steps taken into watts, which are the thing's currency. You put one of your Pokemon into the Pokewalker and send them on a stroll down one of the 27 courses. Each course contains 6 different Pokemon and 10 items. Using watts lets you search for Pokemon and items and unlocks new courses. Then after the stroll has concluded, you get to transfer the Pokemon you caught and the items you found back to your copy of HeartGold or SoulSilver. I wish I had more to say on the matter. I've never used a Pokewalker, and as much as I wanted to buy one for the video, I wasn't going to spend $50 so I could talk about it for 1 minute then never use it again. The amount of content in the Pokewalker is very wide, because you're intended to carry it with you all day every day, but it's not very deep. Really, the most interesting thing to say is that it'll take you 454,250 watts to unlock all the courses. Considering you only get 1 watt per 20 steps, that's 9,085,000 steps right there. So in order for me, a 5'10" man, to unlock all the Pokewalker courses, I would have to walk 4,158 miles. Straight bungo. Now we get to the in-game events that only trigger after going to in-person events. By bringing a Pikachu-colored Pikachu to the Ilex Forest Shrine, you encounter a spiky-eared Pikachu Pikachu, who is just a regular Pikachu but with a spiky ear. She can't be traded or evolved, but she's cute I guess, and was made an outskin for Pikachu in Smash Ultimate. By obtaining an Enigma Stone and bringing it to the Pewter Museum of Science, Steven Stone will discover it to be the Soul Dew. Afterwards, either Latios or Latios, depending on which version you're playing, will appear and you can catch it. By bringing a Celebi to the Ilex Forest Shrine, you go back in time and fight Giovanni. Here you learn that your rival, Silver, is actually Giovanni's son, and that the reason Giovanni never showed up to the Goldenrod Radio Tower is because you kicked his ass at Tojo Falls. But by far the coolest in-game event happens when you take an Arceus to the ruins of Alph. You run into an archaeologist who ushers you into the ruins. There, through the power of Unknown and Arceus, you are teleported to the Sinjoh ruins, a place far to the north that blends the cultures of Johto and Sinnoh. You meet Cynthia, who shows you the mystery stage and tells you that Arceus can create one of the members of the creation trio for you: Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. You get to pick which one you want, then you're shown this baffling cutscene. Afterwards, you're teleported back to the ruins of Alph. I love this event so much. It's such a strange microcosm of how elaborate the world of Pokemon can get. I wish there was more stuff like this that wasn't tied to event-exclusive Pokemon. I want more little events that only trigger when you have certain Pokemon in order to better show the uniqueness of the different species. A Pokemon's merit should not be judged solely on how well it performs in battle. They should have other opportunities to shine. What if you brought like a fire-type Pokemon to an icy cave and they mounted some ice to unlock a secret area? What if you needed a poison type to clear some dense undergrowth in a forest? What if by having some big scary Pokemon with you, wild Pokemon wouldn't attack you? But then that mechanic would also apply to Masquerain because that Pokemon is based on bugs that use eye spots to frighten predators. What if you were persecuted by the Inquisition for imprisoning their god in a ball? Now, is Pokemon an RPG whose central mechanic at the end of the day is battling? Yes, but RPGs have more to them than just battles. I want these fun creatures to interact with the world in fun ways. Really, going to the Sinjoh ruins depressed me because I don't think a Pokemon game will ever scratch the itch that this event gave me. I think that's the best way to describe how I feel about HeartGold and SoulSilver. I love them dearly, but they warped what I want out of a Pokemon game so much that I don't think I'll ever be happy with anything Game Freak gives us. HeartGold and SoulSilver succeed at not just being a good remake, but a good game. You don't need to have the context of the original Gold and Silver to enjoy these games. It's like how Gold and Silver were not just a good sequel, but a good game. Those games didn't require you to have the context of Red and Blue to enjoy them either. Nearly everything about HeartGold and SoulSilver shows just how much care went into these games. Morimoto's quote about making HeartGold and SoulSilver a totally new game can be seen by the inclusion of the Battle Frontier, the Pokethlon, and the Safari Zone. Smaller changes, such as having your Pokemon follow you and being able to take photos along the journey, make this game feel totally brand new. They're much less obtuse than Gold and Silver as well. Specifically, the HMs for Surf, Strength, and Waterfall are much easier to obtain in HeartGold and SoulSilver than they are in those games. And seeing all that was put back into Kanto, the Seafoam Islands, Viridian Forest, the Pewter Museum of Science, the Safari Zone being accessible, as the PAL Park, Cerulean Cave, Mewtwo, the legendary birds, shows that the reason Kanto was so underwhelming in Gold and Silver was not due to negligence but due to technical limitations. If HeartGold and SoulSilver were content to just be remakes, then none of that stuff likely would have been brought back. Considering that Gold and Silver were supposed to be the ultimate Pokemon games, it stands to reason that the remakes would also have to be the ultimate Pokemon games. And they kind of are. The sheer amount of added content, combined with how much changes every single day and how many Pokemon there are to catch, creates a game that you could play every day for a very long time and not run out of things to do. With nothing more than a copy of HeartGold and a Pokewalker, you can obtain 395 types of Pokemon, over 80% of the national Pokedex. In SoulSilver, that number's 393. That's crazy. Really, it's just poetic that the ultimate Pokemon games received the ultimate remake. Take care.